Here we go. We are recording. All right, tonight, the Chumash here, Fred, we got a Chumash for you. Fred, we got one. Now we're going to continue. We're in the second commandment. First, the beginning of the second commandment is Lo Yihi Eloka, should not be for you. We learned that means that we are not to even think, have a thought that perhaps there can be some substance to anything which is independent of God himself, any independent power. Nothing has control. There is nothing of control other than God. Now, we mentioned also Maimonides lists each of these verses in the second, we call it the second commandment, as we already learned. It really should be the second statement. There are 10 statements. The Rambam says in the second statement, there are 4 mitzvahs. Should not be, should not make, should not prostrate, and we should not worship, should not serve. Okay? So tonight we're looking at the second portion, which is on page 409, verse 4. 409, verse 4. This is all part of the second commandment. It begins in verse 3, you should not recognize, means we shouldn't even think or consider. In verse 4, you shall not make yourself a carved image nor any likeness of that which is in the heavens above or on the earth below or in the water beneath the earth. The Hebrew is, don't make for yourself a pesel, chol tamuna, 2 things. A pesel. Tamuna means an image or likeness. What's a pesel? So he translates as a carved image. We'll see in a moment. So this verse says not just we should not make a carved image, it says we should not make for yourself. So what does this mean we shouldn't make for ourselves? So this means that we ourselves should not actually make it, form it, fashion it, nor should we commission anyone else to do it on our behalf. So if I were to hire somebody and say, I want you to make this for me, that is also biblically prohibited, contained within this verse. The Rambam is of the opinion that what's contained in this verse, this prohibition of not making for ourselves, mean we're not allowed to make for ourselves this image or whatever for the purpose of worshiping. Now, what if we don't make it to worship? What if we make it to sell to somebody else? Or we want to use it as a decoration. But we're not going to worship it. We know that it's worthless, it's meaningless. So the Rambam is of the opinion that, yes, it's prohibited, but not by this verse. Which verse prohibits it? Let's turn to page 413. 413. Chapter 20, verse 20. It says, you shall not make images of that, of images of what is with me. Gods of silver, gods of gold, you shall not make for yourselves. So what is this verse coming to teach us? Isn't this similar to what we just said? Shouldn't make any images for ourselves? The answer is this is talking about a situation where we are not making it as a deity, we're not making it to worship it, we're making it to sell it to whoever, even to a Gentile, we're making it for decoration, decorative purposes. It's prohibited biblically from Exodus 20:20 vision, 20:20, it's prohibited. But that would not carry necessarily a death penalty, capital punishment. Capital punishment is what's contained here in the 10 Commandments, back on 409, where it says, you shall not make for yourself a pesel or any likeness. According to Maimonides, this is talking that we should not commission, make, ourselves or have made for us something that we recognize as an independent authority, a power, has such a power, that carries capital punishment. This is the opinion of Maimonides. I point this out because later on, we'll see how this plays a role. Please be aware that the opinion of Maimonides is an individual opinion. Most of the poskim disagree. They are of the opinion that whether we make it for worship, whether we make it for sale, whether we make it for decorative purposes, it is prohibited by virtue of this verse of chapter 20, verse 4, right here. And yes, it would carry a capital punishment.
What is the image that you've got in the office window of a rabbi? So, you want me to go get it?
No, I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Okay, that's a very good point. You have it. You know, many people, because of that, they'll say that the image, it's not made for the purpose of being a deity, it's just an image of something. But Fred is saying, but you know, even though an image, therefore, you won't find things like that in the home of a Hasidim. They wouldn't have such a thing. And even those who might, they will break it somehow. It has to be incomplete. It shouldn't be a full figure, full form, for exactly that reason. But it's not made for the purpose of representing something that other than you go to a baseball game and you buy a bobblehead, you buy one of these figures or figurines, a doll or whatever it might be. That's not something which is for they have a power unto themselves or an individual control. Okay, what then exactly? Yes, ma'am.
The word pesel is, from what I remember learning, pesel always referred to an idol. It was specifically made for something that they worship.
We usually translate the word pesel as an idol. That is correct. The word pesel is from the same root as the Hebrew word pasul. What does pasul mean? Something disqualified. Something is no longer usable. For example, if we find a mistake in the Torah scroll, that, for example, let's say some of the ink has been chipped and the letter is incomplete, the Torah is pasul. It's disqualified. You have to fix it. So the word pasul usually means something which is disqualified. But what exactly does it mean here? Let's take a look. Pesel. So usually it's translated as any type of an image, a sculpture, a portrait, an engraving, even if it's done not for the purpose of worshiping, but just to show respect. That means we recognize, the person says, this is something which is recognized by others as being something of religious significance. And they might deify it. I don't, but I'll show my respect. And we'll have this also. That is usually how we translate a pesel. That's a pesel, something which is, you say an idol, but specifically an idol that we don't idolize, others do. That's usually how it's translated. However, the great commentary, the holy Or HaChaim, he says he doesn't understand this entire verse. What is this verse telling us? We shouldn't make an image or likeness or whatever. The previous verse just said, Lo yiyah you shouldn't recognize, which we said means that even if we don't have any image, we don't have any portrait, any sculpture, yes. Probably his, tell him it's probably his connection. Probably his. This seems to be working. Yeah, this is, please tell him that ours is working. It must be his. Okay, all right. So, the Or Chaim says the previous verse tells us that it is biblically prohibited for a person, that was we mentioned 2 weeks ago. This is Very rare. You don't see this where the Torah prohibits thought. The Torah prohibits speech, lashon hara, actions. We shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do that. Thought? The Torah prohibits thought. This we find it. It says that even a thought, if a person thinks and says, well, maybe this is a deity, maybe there is something to this. And I'm going to look into it, not for educational purposes. I mean, maybe there might be something there. I'm leaning in that direction. That's biblically prohibited. It's okay to learn and understand the foolishness involved, but for a person to pursue it as a possibility, that's biblically prohibited. If that's the case, then we need to have a verse to tell us that if we're going to make an image, a sculpture, we're going to have a portrait of that which is deified, that's prohibited? Of course it is. If I'm not allowed to think it, then certainly I can't make it. How do we understand this? Perhaps we'll say that I'm not allowed to think about it, accepting it for myself. And I certainly can't make it for myself. But maybe this verse is coming to teach us that I cannot make it for others. Can't be in the business. I can't be in the business that Abraham's father was in, making and selling idols. He didn't believe it, but he made a lot of money on it, made a profit. So he sold it. Abraham told him you can't do that either. Maybe that's what it's coming to say. Don't make, even if you don't believe, don't make to sell to others. Chaim says that's can't tolerate that. Why? Because the verse clearly says, don't make for yourself. The verse is prohibiting not making to sell. We just said the Rambam says to make it to sell is not included in this. So it means we cannot make for ourselves. So what's going on? There Chaim says something which is very, very important. And this is the portal to everything else. And that is the first verse that tells us we shouldn't think, consider, recognize a deity, meaning we shouldn't accept it as being the prime creator. Can't do that. That's the first. That's don't recognize gods of others in my presence. Don't consider it. Don't think it. But what if we say, no, there is only one true God. There's one creator. There's one creator. But God gave some of his authority. He distributed some of his authority to others. And God is the king. But there are ministers. There are members of his cabinet. And I recognize that they have power and control and authority. This, Chaim tells us, was the tragic mistake of humanity. A mistake that was made not only way back when, but is made even today, as we'll see. No one should think mankind is not worthy of relating with the one true God, creator and master of all that exists. Sometimes we feel, yeah, God, he's God, he's everything. He's omnipotent, he's omniscient, he knows all everything, no past, present, future. God, there's nothing physical. What? I should have a relationship? You think God is considered or concerned about me? You think he's concerned about me? Well, what am I? I'm like a little speck. I'm nothing. I'm worthless. God should pay attention to me. Okay, maybe God made some angels and he authorized others and he whatever, and he put them in charge. But do you think God doesn't have better things to do than be concerned about me? I'm not worthy. And therefore, I need a medium. I need a channel. I need a means of communicating with this God. I can't communicate directly. Can't do that. I have to have some medium. But there's no direct relationship between man and God. That's the tragic mistake. And therefore, someone might think, I am going to make an image, a pestle. What is a pestle? Pestle means it's an image, it's an idol. I don't worship that idol. That idol is not a deity to me, but that idol is a means and a bridge and a conduit between myself and my creator. That's a pestle. Gives us a whole new perspective. And with this, we can understand, we talk about idolatry. We think idolatry, you know what? Our sages tell us that the men of the great assembly prayed and fasted and prayed unto God that this incredible urge and desire people had for idolatry, it was overwhelming. Please remove it. It was removed. We can't understand it. What are they involved in idolatry? It's an idol. It's a piece of stone. It's a piece of wood. What's going on? Although they do say idolatry is like an ism. You know, one of the things people believe in. They believe in communism, socialism. They believe in equality, this, the march for who knows what, whatever it might be. The isms. What is the origin of idolatry? So let's turn to page 23, Genesis chapter 4, verse 26. Page 23. This is talking about after Adam and Eve were dismissed from the Garden of Eden, and it talks about how Adam had a son, his name was Seth. It talks about the generations that follow. So let's take a look. Let's start with verse, where did I say? Let's do verse 25. Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and named him Seth, because God has provided me another child in place of Abel, for Cain had killed him. And as for Seth, to him also a son was born, and he named him Enosh. Then to call in the name of Hashem became profane. What happened? What does that mean? This is called Dor Enosh, the generation of Enosh. What happened? The Rambam Maimonides gives a description of what took place in the generation of Enosh. If you want to take a look here on 23 at the footnote, you see the footnote, number 26, who wants to read it nice and super loud?
I know on Plan B, right?
Super loud, go ahead, super loud, verse 26, go ahead.
The generation of Enosh introduced idolatry, which was to become the light of humanity for thousands of years. By ascribing godlike qualities to man and lifeless objects, they created the abominable situation in which to call in the name of Hashem became profane. Rambam explains how the grievous misconception of idol worship began and developed. Very briefly, he says that it began when people felt that they should honor the heavenly bodies as God's emissaries to the world, just as it is proper to honor the ministers of a ruler. Eventually, this trend spread and became more and more corrupted, until worshippers forgot about God and assumed that all powers were vested in whatever representation they chose to worship.
Okay. Back on page 408, we have a similar explanation. If you look back at 408, here where it talks about second commandment, the prohibition of idolatry, on the right, on the left-hand side, all the way in the bottom of 408, it says Rambam and Ramban. You can say it, go ahead. See it?
Yeah. Rambam, Rabban, and others trace the development of idolatry from early history, when it was clear to all that there was a creator. People began to feel that by showing respect for the intermediaries through which God controls the universe, they were displaying reverence for him, much as one honors a king or president by showing respect to his emissaries and ministers. Then, in time, people began to believe that these forces and beings had independent powers and came to worship them as independent entities. At first, they worshiped the angels, which are heavenly, spiritual beings. In time, the cult spread to the heavenly bodies and even to people of exceptional ability, such as Pharaoh and Nebuchadnezzar. The idolaters felt that their worship would increase the power of the heavenly force or the king that guided their destinies, because they would have the merit of the multitudes, in addition to their own considerable powers. Later, the corruption spread even to the worship of Shadim, or demons, evil, semi-spiritual beings. The prohibition in this verse refers to all beings of any form that can conceivably be worshipped.
This is how it formed. At the beginning, they began to serve the stars and the constellations. And they also, the commentaries say, other than the Rambam and Ramban, that they recognized that God created every nation with a guardian angel. And therefore they turned to this guardian angel, requesting that it function as an advocate on their behalf. They saw darkness, they saw light, and they recognized that each one seems to be a great force. Look at the sun. We have a solar system, the sun, we have light, we have energy, we have warmth. Without the sun, one degree further from the sun, this planet could not continue. Life could not continue on this planet. So they began to worship these various beings as ministers of the king. They didn't think that should be deified. They were not gods. They had no autonomy, but they were the ministers of the king. And therefore, as a sign of respect for the king, you stand for the queen, you stand for the prince, you stand for the princess. Eventually, they began to build temples. And over the course of time, they began to assume that these temple occupants had independent authority and control. Oh, maybe there was indeed a God, a creator, but he delegated his authority to them. And then there arose false prophets. And what resulted was the denial of what we call hashgacha pratis. Hashgacha means supervision, pratis means for every detail. That means in Judaism, we believe that God pays close attention to every detail in our lives. That means that if we sneeze, God knows all about it. If we stub our toe, that's it. You got a run in your stocking. God is well aware. Okay? Whatever it is, hashgacha pratis. And they even believe that those who might be born under certain stars at certain times are imbued with a divinity. Paro, Nebuchadnezzar. Even today, this continues. What great leader, who happens to be in exile, what great leader is viewed as being born under the sign in which there are elements of divinity? Excellent. Whoa. Excellent. Wow, that's terrific. The Dalai Lama. As a child, they would recognize whatever it might be. Even today, you would think, if somebody were to say to you today, you think there are people who believe that some individuals are born with divine spirits, that there's divinity? You think, buddy, this 21st century, you crazy? Yes. That's the Dalai Lama. There's so many followers.
The writing article was went to the Dalai Lama to bless Israel because of the war. That's where
That's when they came, and he said to him, "Hello, Dolly." Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, nice try. So one of the questions we asked was that in the first of the 10 commandments, it says, "I am Hashem, your God, who has taken you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slavery." So we asked the question, and we spent ample time on this. If God is presenting his resume, he's telling us who he is, he should say, "I am the Lord your God who created the universe." Ex nihilo, something from absolutely nothing, defying all science. That's more impressive. So we mentioned, because yes, that would prove God's the creator, but the Exodus, we talk about the Exodus, not creation. Creation to tell us that God is not only the creator, but he is the guide, the borei and manhig, Maimonides says God is our manhig. He's our guide. He's the master of all that exists. He didn't just create, program, you're on your own. No. There's hashgacha pratis. I know what's going on. I'm with you every step of the way. Yeah, I gave you that challenge. That's right. This thing that happened, I tested you. I know about it. And I know that you didn't do it as well as you could. I know that I can do better, whatever it is. That's okay, because you're going to get another challenge too. I'm with you step by step, just like a parent holds a child when they take their first steps. Then we let go. What's going to happen? Let go. We'll fall down. God knows we're going to fall down. I said, but that's okay. I'll help you get up. And you take another step. And if we keep doing this, you're going to learn to walk all by yourself. That's what it is. God is there for us to establish a personal bond. God is telling us, where do we see that I have this personal hashgacha pratis, this personal close relationship? You don't see it from creation, you see it from the Exodus. I saw what was happening in your lives, and I came and I took you out, and I did so in a miraculous fashion. And please be aware, if I didn't, if I would have left you to mazel, we usually translate mazel as being luck, fortune. Mazel means constellations, the stars. Meaning, if I would have left you to the forces of nature and the angels to whom I so called delegated, we'd still be slaves. We would still be slaves. The only reason that we are not slaves is because God is our guide and he has a personal connection. Therefore, God says, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, meaning that I've got a close bond with you and I'm aware and I'm involved, and you don't need a medium or an agent or anything else. It's only me and you. So consequently, we understand while the very next commandment is there should not be the gods of others, nothing of others. It flows naturally. And not only that, we see this clearly from the plague of the firstborn. We say in the Haggadah on Pesach, we say that God tells us, I will bring the plague of the firstborn. God came into Egypt, and in the Haggadah it says, I, not an angel. I, and not a seraph. I, and not this. I, and not that. Well, what's God coming along and say, hey, look what I can do? No, God is saying, I'm involved in your life. I don't delegate. You might think I delegate. I don't delegate. Oh yeah, there are angels. I'll send the angels. They have no authority. When I say delegate, means that I've imbued them with some element of control and authority. Nope. They're nothing more like than a stick. If the stick is in your hand, that stick doesn't have any control or authority. It's just an extension of your authority. That's what we see from the Haggadah, that we have a direct and personal relationship with God. And that's why when we pray, we don't pray to an agent. We don't pray to a prince or princess. We don't pray to an angel. We say, Baruch Atah. Blessed are you, Hashem. We pray directly to God. Think about that for a moment. It's astounding. We say a bracha, whatever the bracha might be. We're going to say shahakol. We're talking to God, talking to him. Think about that for just a moment. It is absolutely remarkable. The point over here is that whereas the Chaim tells us a tragic mistake is that they said, who and what is man? We sinned. Adam and Eve, created by God, not from father and mother. They were created by God himself, and they sinned in the Garden of Eden. What about us? Are we worthy? We're filled with sin. The answer is, we are never rejected. There is no such thing. A person is never rejected. Oh, we might misbehave, and it has to be corrected, but we will never be rejected. Now, something which most people are not aware of is that there are 7 Noahide laws, 7 laws that were given to Noah and his sons, which even the Gentile world is obligated to fulfill. One of those laws is this commandment, the first 2 commandments, to know the existence of God and not to recognize nor make images of deifying or assuming there are delegated authorities other than God. This applies not just to us, to every creation of the Almighty. Now, as sages in the Zohar, Kabbalistic teachings, see something else. The fact that it says you shall not make yourself carved image could have said, don't make a carved image. It says, don't make yourself. They see something on a deeper level. They see that God is telling us that we have responsibilities to see that we don't make human beings into these carved images. What do we mean? It means that we have an obligation and a responsibility to provide an appropriate education for our children. Now, just because we provide it doesn't mean that they're going to do anything with it. They're going to receive it or whatever. But our responsibility is put the food in front of them. Maybe they'll eat. If they don't eat now, maybe they'll eat later. If they don't eat later, maybe when they get hungry. Might take 10, 20 years till they get hungry. But know what it is. What should we teach them? Knowledge of God, the existence of God. There's a God. They should hear about it. Not only that, they should know that we all possess an eternal soul. And that there is an Olam Haba, there is a world to come. They should also know that there is a Mashiach. There is an anointed one who will bring in a period of redemption in which there will be true peace on earth. And there's going to be harmony for all mankind, and there will eventually be a resurrection of the dead. You know, this is something we should talk about at home. You know, okay, the Seder we talk about it, we'll do things, we'll say brachas, we'll make kiddush, we'll make a motzi, we'll say a bracha. Ever stop and think what we're saying? God, you're the one who brings forth bread from the ground. Wow. Planted a little seed, it turns into this. It's unbelievable. You're the one who is Hazanas HaKol. You're the one who provides food for every living creature on the face of the earth. Oh, yes, man has to take the wheat and turn it into bread, but God, you're the one who provides it. Think about that. This should be discussed in our home. We have a soul. It's eternal. There's a world to come. We also have to educate our children and ourselves. There's such a thing called a Masorah. Masorah is usually translated as tradition, but it means more than that. It means that the knowledge that we have, the explanations, you can challenge me. How do I know this I'm talking about? Where do I get it from? Everything has a source. Everything. Occasionally somebody might say, well, I understand it this way, but I have to be able to say, I understand the teachings of our sages, those who are far greater in their knowledge and their perception, because what we are studying originates at Sinai, what God taught Moshe. Every verse that we are reading is what God gave Moshe. These explanations are the explanations that were taught to Moshe. And it was passed down from generation to generation. That's called the Masorah. Unfortunately, you have some people who they just open up a Bible and start expressing their imagination. And that's what led to different denominations within different religions and everything. Another thing, don't make ourselves into pesels. They say this is incredible. This is from the Zohar. We have to be careful that we don't get excessively angry. We can show anger, especially when teaching our children, don't do this. And they see we're angry. Oh, wow, this must be bad. This makes an impression. But we should never lose ourselves in anger. I know I have a problem with this. But the Ramban wrote a letter to his son. It's called the Igeres Ramban. And in the beginning, he says, be very, very careful with your temperament. Never get angry. Because kol hakoyes, whoever gets angry is filled with kas, kol mine gehenim sholtem. All forms of purgatory are ruling over it. Person who gets angry, we forget about everything. We've lost our moral compass. We've lost our spiritual compass. I'm angry, and I don't care what I'm going to say and who I'm going to insult and whatever it is, because I'm so upset and whatever, and I forget about Torah, mitzvahs, God, everything, making ourselves into an idol. What an incredible things. And then Proverbs chapter 16, verse 5, the verse King Solomon says, Toyavas Hashem. What's a Toyavas? An abomination unto God, that which is despised by God, Kol Gova Lei. One who has a haughty, conceited heart. Person who thinks, I don't need anybody. I'm the elite. I know better. I'm smarter. I'm more talented. I'm God's gift to the world. That is making ourselves into an idol. And that is despised by God. Now, a person should feel confident, and a person should feel good about themselves. But we should know that whatever great achievements we have is a gift from God. Didn't Moshe Rabbeinu know who he was? Didn't he know he was the most humble man? Didn't he know that he's the only human being to be 40 days and 40 nights on Sinai without food, without water, talking to angels? Didn't he know that the verse in this Shabbos, this week's Parsha, towards the end of the verse, the end of the Parsha, God says to Miriam and Aaron were speaking about Moshe, how come he divorced his wife? What's going on? He's a prophet. We're prophets. We don't get it. And God said, your prophecy pales in comparison. I speak to Moshe face to face. His perception is clear. In my entire household, he is trustworthy. Didn't Moshe know that? He has to have known it. It's in the Torah. He taught it to us. The answer is, of course, Moshe knew it. But Moshe said, whatever achievements, accomplishments, and gifts that I have are exactly that. It's all from God. If God gave me a beautiful voice and God gave me incredible strength, why should I become haughty? It's what I was given. Utilizing what I was provided. But for a person to become conceited, that is making ourselves an idol. According to the Zohar, this is included in this prohibition. So now we have to deal with a very difficult question. We know about the golden calf. And they came to Aaron, and Aaron said, bring me your gold or whatever. And he took the gold, put it into the furnace or whatever, and out comes the golden calf. How did Aaron do that? How could he do that? The golden calf, isn't this an idol? And there were those who worshipped it. This is your God, Israel, the mixed multitude said. How could the holy, sacred Aaron, the prototype of a Kohen, that the Ramban says is the Kadosh Hashem, he is the one who has earned the title of being the Holy One of God. How can he be a participant to this? So, first of all, Aaron had a nephew. His sister Miriam had a son. His name was Hur. Hur, when he saw the people wanting to have something, they thought Moshe died and they have to have some new leadership or whatever, he protested. And he protested vehemently. And they stoned him. They said, you're leading us down a terrible path. This is what we need. They threw stones and they killed him. Aaron saw that Hur was killed. He says, if I don't do something here to gain control of this chaos, they'll kill me too. But the question is, should he martyr himself? Is an individual allowed or obligated to martyr themselves rather than to engage in idolatry? There are 3 mitzvahs in the Torah that if somebody says, you do this, or I will take your life, you say, I'm not doing it. One is idolatry. One is to kill actively another person, not just aggravate them. Kill them actively, take their life. The third is to commit adultery or incest. Somebody says you're going to do this, or you're going to have with this woman, or I'm going to kill you. Can't do it. So if that's the case, so what if Aaron saw Hur was killed? He should have allowed himself to be killed. So we can answer with the Rambam. We said the Rambam says, when is it considered the idolatry that carries a capital offense? That's only when this image is made for the purpose of worship. Was this golden calf made by Aaron for the purpose of worship? No, Aaron didn't do that. So there, yeah, but it might be prohibited. Might be prohibited from chapter 20, verse 20. True. But Aaron said, wait a second. It might be prohibited, but I'm not obligated to martyr myself since it's not being made for the purpose of worship. So according to the Rambam, we have a path. But the problem is, as I said, that's the opinion of the Rambam. But it's a singular opinion. Most of the other commentaries disagree. And they're of the opinion that even if an image is made not for the purpose of worship, but for sale or decoration, if we're making some image of a deity, we have to martyr ourselves. According to those, why didn't Aaron martyr himself?
So could Aaron have thought that if God forbid they kill me, then they're really gonna go up the deep end?
Yes.
That he needed to be there.
And how do you see that? You're absolutely right. Aaron said if he would be killed, the consequences would be devastating. How did Aaron know that? Because Aaron had an incredible perception. And we see that happen in the future. There was a prophet we had, Zechariah. And there was a time in which many in Israel were going astray. And the prophet came with God's prophecy and rebuked Klal Yisrael. Not all, but too many. He rebuked them. And it was by the temple. It was right outside the temple. And they stoned him and they killed him. Prophet Zechariah. Okay, happened. He was killed and his blood was spilled on the stone. Centuries later, when the Romans came and destroyed the second temple, not sure if it was Hadrian or if it was Vespasian or which one, I don't remember. But they came and they said, oh, no, it could have been somebody else. I'm not sure who. In which they came and they said, why is there blood constantly on this stone? No matter how many times we clean it, there's always blood. How does blood come from the stone? So they said, well, it's the blood of the sacrifices. They said, don't tell me about the sacrifices. So they were compelled to say to this Roman, this is the blood of Zechariah the prophet that we spilled when we refuse to humble ourselves and submit to the prophetic word of God. And that blood continues to be there. And he said, I will avenge his blood. The Talmud of the Tractate of Gittin, which we learn on Tisha B'Av, speaks about he brought his legions and literally hundreds of thousands of Jews slaughtered. Until finally, wasn't kicking myself, I forget. Wasn't the space, I forgot who it was. Until he said to himself, what have I done? If the spilling of one Jew's blood, Zechariah, can result in so many Jews being killed, what's going to happen to me? Become many I'm responsible for killing. And he abdicated. He wasn't a Caesar. Abdicated, ran away, and the Talmud says he converted to Judaism. Can you believe it? They accepted him as a true, sincere convert. Can you imagine? Hitler Yamach Shemo would say, I regret what I've done, I want to convert. Kidding? Accepted him as a true convert. Aaron recognized if his blood would be spilled, it would be similar to that which would take place with Zechariah. Another answer. Let's go to page 495. This is where we have. They came to him and they said, we don't know what happened to this man Moses. He went up 40 days ago. We don't know how many days ago. He went without food, without water. We don't know what happened to them. What's gonna take place where we don't have a leader? So on page 490, verse 2, Aaron said to them, remove the rings of gold that are in the ears of your wives, sons, and daughters. Bring them to me. Thinking that by the time they're going to bring it, it'll take a day, 2 days, 3 days, and Moshe will be here. Well, the entire people removed the gold rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. Now, the women didn't want to do it. Not because they wanted to keep their jewelry. How do you know? Maybe they didn't want to give up their earrings because they wanted to keep their jewelry. How do you know that's incorrect? Because the tabernacle, when it needed gold and silver, the first to come were the women. They brought their jewelry. Over here, they didn't want to participate. The tribe of Levi and the women refused to participate, but the men brought it. So what did he do? He took it from their hands, bound it up in a cloth, and fashioned it into a molten calf. What does it mean they fashioned? So if you look, let's see, does it have over here? Look at the commentary on the bottom, verse 4 on the left-hand side. You want to read that, Ronnie? See number 4 on the bottom of 495.
And Aaron bound up the gold and threw it into the fire, hoping that a shapeless mask would emerge, thus causing further delay until Moshe returned.
He threw it in the fire. He didn't shape and form. It says Vayaseu. He threw it in. And you know what happened? Out came a golden calf. How did that happen? Go ahead.
The Egyptian sorcerers of the era of Rav exercised their occult powers to cause the calf to emerge, according to Rashi. Although Aaron did not fashion the calf in the literal sense, he is described as its maker, since he was the one who threw the gold into the fire. The act that resulted in the creation of the gold.
Okay, so the question was, how could Aaron be a participant and make the golden calf? The answer is he didn't. He didn't make the golden calf. He took the gold, he threw it in the furnace. He's just going to melt it down. And who knows what will happen? Will come out this, and by the time they figure out what to do, and they do it, Moshe will be here. He didn't make anything. So Aaron wasn't involved in the golden calf. That's why he didn't martyr himself. And then another answer is that even Israel was not involved in idolatry. Why? Because if we go back, let's go back to 493, previous page, verse 1. The people saw that Moses had delayed in descending the mountain, and the people gathered around Aaron and said to him, rise up, make for us gods that will go before us. Now, the Hebrew word for gods is Elohim, which we said 2 weeks ago means a power, an authority that will go before us. For this man, Moses, who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we don't know what became of him. They never, Klal Yisrael never requested any deity. You know what they were looking for? A leader. Moshe, our leader, we don't know what happened. See if there's something that we can create, do whatever it might be, which would be a substitute for Moshe. Maybe there's some image or something through which God will communicate with us. He's communicating to us through Moshe. Maybe there's another means of communication. It was the Egyptians who said, this is your God, Israel. Doesn't say in the verse. Let's see, where is that? I want to show you exactly.
verse 4.
Verse 4, he took it, oh, you're right. He took it from their hands, bound them in a cloth, fastened them on get. They said, who said? This is your God, Israel, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. What do you mean this is your God? Who said this? If the Jews said it, they should have said, this is our God who took us out. This is your God, Israel, as if Israel's not speaking, someone else is. Indeed, it was the Egyptians, the Arava. They're the ones who proclaimed it as a deity. Now, there were around 3,000 of the Jewish people who went astray. And they thought there was something divine about this calf or whatever it is. They make the mistake. But if we ask, how could Aaron do it? The answer is Aaron didn't do it. He threw it in the fire. And what he was doing was not to create some deity, wasn't to create something that God delegated authority, but rather some means through which God will communicate to us, a substitute for Moshe. Therefore, the golden calf really wasn't any idolatry whatsoever. Not for Aaron, not for the overwhelming majority of Klal Yisrael. But this is the prohibition, and again, the essential message of this prohibition is that we are never rejected, and we have a direct personal relationship with our Creator. Next week, I'll continue. Okay? All right. What? Titus? No, it wasn't Titus. No. Titus destroyed the temple.